Hi, Bob from Pinegrow here with another tutorial. Page dividers play a number of roles in web design. They can help to separate different blocks of content and also help to lead the user down the page. Graphical dividers can make your page pop and look more dynamic. The Pinegrow Bootstrap and Tailwind blocks templates contain a number of dividers for use in your projects. In addition, there are a number of divider builders available on the web that can be used from within Pinegrow to build custom geometric dividers. Numerous non-geometric designs can be found on the web, and you can even create and use your own. In this tutorial, we will explore the usage and modification of the dividers built into Pinegrow, as well as demonstrating how you can tap into the wealth of files available on the web. Let's get started. Pinegrow has a number of dividers within both the Bootstrap 4 and Tailwind blocks libraries. There are some differences in the selection of dividers. Primarily, these divider blocks are for use within the indicated frameworks, but don't let the names fool you. All of the graphical dividers are mostly plain SVG, so they can be used in any type of framework, even plain HTML. If you open one of the pre-made blocks templates, the Blocks tab will be automatically added to the library panel. In any other framework, they can be loaded in by going to the File menu and selecting Manage Libraries and Plugins. So let's quickly open just a plain HTML project so that we can see how that can be done. So we'll go to New Page or Project, plain HTML, load the index. Let's go ahead and save that first. So now once we have our page open, we can go up to File, select Manage Libraries and Plugins, and then we can choose to activate either the Bootstrap 4 or Tailwind CSS blocks. So as you can see, Pinegrow automatically added in the Bootstrap or the block CSS for me. However, that's not going to activate Bootstrap on this page, and so the majority of the blocks still won't look correct. However, if we look in the library now, we do have a Blocks tab. Actually, this is already scrolled to the dividers. These up here will not work correctly. However, these dividers from 8 to 15 are all plain SVG. And so you can add them onto the page. You notice that the color here is different, and that's because this color is being set by a Bootstrap class div. If we look at these properties on this, we can see that the color is being set with this class right here, bg-primary. Since we don't have Bootstrap loaded into the page, that color won't be added, and you can instead change the color of this by selecting it and then adding a color to the text. So go to the Style panel, we can just inline this, and we can just say color blue. All right, so for the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to concentrate on using the blocks from within Bootstrap. But the general procedure for using these and the general procedure for altering these blocks is going to be the same whether you're using Bootstrap, Tailwind, or HTML for the most part. So let's go ahead and close this out. And let's go ahead and start a new page or project. This time we're going to use Bootstrap 4. We'll just start with a blank page. And again, let's go ahead and save this. So if we look in our library, again, we have that blocks available. Now, in this case, all of these blocks will work. All of the dividers will work, not just the SVG ones. All right, so first thing we should do is get some content onto the page. I'm just going to do this with Emmet. So if you look under Support and go to the Settings, scroll down, you can see down in the code editing section where you can change your editing theme, your font size, your font. You can also check this box, use Emmet in the code editor. I really like Emmet a lot. It's quick and easy. I personally find it to be easier than Pug. So I'm just going to put a line of Emmet in here and then I'll explain it really quickly. All right. So basically this is just a little bit of Emmet that says, first create a div that has the classes, so the period, container, pt-4, and pb-4 on it. Then within that container, make a row. Within that row, make a div with the class of col-md-4. So this is a bootstrap class that will make them span 4 units of the page. Make 3 of those, and then within those, add an image with the image fluid class. I think that's correct. And then add the for this image, add a source of the one placeholder. Just selected 3. Then as a sibling, add an H3 with a column title, and then as another sibling, add a paragraph and fill that paragraph with 30 characters of lorem ipsum. And so once you type your Emmet out here in the code editor, you can just hit tab. Okay, now that we have our some content in here to fool around with, let's just throw a quick title on this. So we'll go back to our tree. So we've got this container with a row and our different columns. Let's stick another container above this. Let's make sure that container is full width. So we're going to go back to Bootstrap. We're going to look for the container control here, and we're going to make this just fluid, so it's going to be full width. Then to that container, we'll go ahead and add a row. And then in that row, we'll go ahead and add an H1. So let's add some color. So this row, we're going to make the background color primary. Let's add some padding to the top and bottom, like 4. Let's center that text up. So in this case, the row is a flex row. So we can center our text using flex properties. We'll just use justify content to the center. And let's change the text color. Just a white. Okay, so we've got a title on here, and we've got three different columns of content. So now at this point, let's go over to our dividers. So again, blocks, if you're not already at the dividers, you can either scroll or drop down this little menu and select dividers off of it. So the first thing, let's just look at using a full width divider. So we'll use this one right here, and we're just going to put it in between our title of our blog and our content. And I'm going to put it outside the container so it spans the whole thing. You can see that it'll come in its own container. So now within this, we can go ahead and edit this text. Something like recent blogs. So that's one way that you can use a divider to span the whole page. So the other way you can use these same dividers is to split up your content. So here at the bottom, we can take, for example, this guy. And in this case, I think we put it right there. And then we're going to take this one. Put it in the same place. And then we'll go back to this one again and put it there. So now these are much bigger. Actually, let's close this down. These are a lot bigger than we'd probably want them to be. So what you can do is you can select those, and then within the properties panel, either for Bootstrap or for Tailwind, you can go ahead and change this spacing. So let's try making it 2. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So we'll do the same with these guys. All right, so now we have sort of our bottoms of each of our columns with a little divider here that gives it a little bit of style, a little bit of interest. So these again are the built-in line dividers that are being used here to separate, but we could also, if we wanted to, change these out for example, an icon divider. So we can hit replace it. That'll put this one again in, and again, we're larger than we want to be, so we're just going to go ahead and make sure that we have the SVG block selected on this. So that's going to be this one, or the span that contains the SVG block. So we're going to select that, go back to our properties, and I guess we can set it to 0. So now if we don't like this down chevron, and I guess there's some extra padding here that we could fool around with to make sure that this is the same size as these guys. We can do that well, I guess we can do that now. So what do we have here? We have padding for on the top and the bottom. So we'll just get rid of those. Now they're pretty much the same size as our other dividers. Then what we can do is, if we don't like this chevron, again, make sure that we're on the SVG. Then we can go down. In this case, we can choose the remix icons, for example, and then pick one we like. How about this guy? So then this guy. We'll just hit replace it. And so now you can see that that's on there. Now this is a little bit big, so we might have to go back up and resize this again. Maybe 1 looks a little bit better. We could also, if we wanted to, change the classes to the classes of these inner parts here that are set to the danger color. We could set those to some other border color. The same with the center span. This center span, if we go out by 1, the color set by background danger, so we can set that background to primary or whatever we feel like. Okay, so what about these other two? Well, we can replace those out as well. So we just go ahead and select them, hit replace it. So this again is a little bit big. Remember that these center sections are SVGs. So if we select that SVG and then look here in our properties panel, we can make it a little smaller. So let's take it down to let's try 60. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty reasonable. We'd want to change the how thick the lines are, maybe. The other thing that we can do is, since this is an SVG, if we look in here, you can open it up. We can change our path items. So for example, we can select this path, go to our Bootstrap, and then change the text color to change that. So let's do this one. Let's grab this guy, make that red too, and let's make our center primary. So we can kind of jazz these different dividers up. Might as well do it with the last one as well. Quickly replace it. And same thing again. So you can change each of the different paths within this. Oh. Select it off the tree, I guess. It's easier. So you can see it's really easy to spiff these dividers up and give them a little bit of your own flair and adapt their colors to being more like what you want for your particular project. So in addition to the line dividers, Pinegrow has dividers composed of geometric shapes. So along the top here, there's different triangular ones, and down below, there's a couple of different wave ones. Like the line dividers, these can be customized to fit to your site. Let's just jump over to an example of where these are being used. So if we open up a new page and we select the Bootstrap 4 blocks templates and open the agency, we can see that this right here is one of those waves. Most probably this one. No, probably divider 14. So again, these can be modified to fit to your project. So right now, because this top section is in red, this has a color of text danger. But from within the properties panel, for either Bootstrap or Tailwinds, you can just go ahead and change that to whatever color you would like. You can also, if for example this next section down had a different color to it, you can also from within the SVG go ahead and change the color for the non-filled in part. In this case, this particular one has that set through the background. So if the next section down had a color of green, we could fill that in with green, fill this in with green, and then you'd have a nice transition from section to section. So in that way you can just customize any of these. The triangles, which don't have an example of right here, can be customized much the same way. So let's just go ahead and close this out. We're not going to bother to save it. So if we wanted to just add one of these dividers here, we can just pick this one, for example. We're going to go ahead and append that. So now we have a divider here with that danger background. Each of these, if you look at the SVG, are different shapes. So we have two different shapes. So we can, if we want, make these, make one blue, for example, and leave the other red. And then we can go back to our list and our tree. Let's go ahead and add a container in just below our divider. And then again, let's make that fluid. Oops. Let's give it a background color, I guess, of red. It's a bit strong, but that's okay. Then within that, we could add, I don't know, some kind of content for the sake of just getting something on the page quickly. We're just going to throw an image there. One of the great things about Pinegrow is that, you know, as you're going, you can see when things make sense, when they don't make sense. So like this is still a little bit funky. We should probably stick an image fluid onto this. And let's stick a column in as well to limit the size, I guess. And really you can just, you know, fool around in a much easier way to get your design right than you could necessarily with having to write the code out by hand. Okay, that's not too bad. So then again, this is flex. So we only have one column here, but what we should be able to do is just go to our flex layout and justify the content again. All right, so now we have a little bit of content here to go in this next section. So now what we're going to want to do is put a border after this section. And so there's a couple of different ways that we could do it. We could go back to our blocks, go to divider 9, drag this down and append it, and then change our colors. In this case, what we would do to make this match up with the section ahead and lead into the next is we could take away this background color and instead give a background of the danger. Then go into our SVG, and for this change the text color to white or whatever we want. So that gives us kind of a funky looking chevron thing. Maybe that's what we're looking for. We can also do this a different way. So I'm just going to take this and delete it out, I guess. So then we're going to take this one. We're going to go ahead and go here to the tree, grab that whole thing and duplicate it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to move it below our container. So now we have this duplicated. Now to make it look like the bottom, like a bottom divider should, we're going to take this, we're going to style it. We're going to go to here, then we're going to go to transforms. We're going to add a transform, and we're going to rotate it both in the X direction and in the Y direction. Whoops, and I'm doing that on the wrong one. We wanted it under rotate. So now we have sort of like a ribbon thing going, a dual ribbon thing. So I think that's kind of nice. And again, if we wanted to, we could change the background color on this. Say, again, our section below it was perhaps green or something like that. Then we could add a class for the background and change it to green or whatever in order to fade into that next section. While both the Tailwind and Bootstrap block dividers look great, sometimes they don't match the project we're putting together. Luckily, Pinegrow makes it easy to bring in dividers from other sources. One good site is GetWaves.io. So this site allows the construction of simple square, triangular, and square wave dividers. Disappointingly, however, it doesn't allow for the construction of more complicated, multiple overlapping figures, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it's a good example. To utilize this or most any similar site in Pinegrow, the easiest way is to navigate to the library panel and then click on the plus icon to add a new tab. So we can do it just here. Click. So then from this context menu, we can then select Open under Load Custom Page Library. This allows us to put in a URL, as well as a short name if we want. That way, if we want in the future to quickly access this, we can just select it from the library. So if we hit Add, we'll get the page loaded in, and you can see it's now under Custom. So in other projects, we could load this in. So once you have this open, normally we would use this to drag blocks to the page. In this case, we want to actually interact with this page. And so we need to click on this icon to allow page clicks. So now from here, we can make a divider. So let's just go ahead and pick that. We could change the color if we wanted. So maybe change it to some kind of red that kind of matches that one over there. I'm not going to bother to go out and find the exact color. One thing that I will say is be a little careful when you're using this tab, the custom tab, to not drag. That sometimes gets misinterpreted. So just click where you want. Now, once you get this wave down here set how you like it and want to incorporate it into your project, you now click on the download cloud. And then from here, click on the copy SVG code. So now with that copied, we navigate back to the normal library tab. And within the insert code box, we go ahead and paste that SVG. Now I'm going to use it to replace this one. So we'll just click on here. Delete that. Oops, I must not have selected the whole thing. Just make sure that we're there. Delete that. And now drag this over to the page. So now we have our divider in. We can see that it's taking up more room than we really want it to. It's a lot larger than we want it to be potentially. So let's see how we can change that. So if we just go and select that SVG, go back over to our properties, we can see that we have a space here for width and height. Now, if we try and change this right now, say we wanted to make this shorter, say half as big. The problem is it's also changing our width. So if we want to leave the width at 100 view width, the entire width of the screen, we need to check this box, preserve aspect ratio. And then for that preserve aspect ratio, we need to give it some value. In this case, we're going to say none. Now what we can do is set that to 100 view width, and now it takes up the entire width of the page. Notice the wave looks a little bit different because we're squishing it. And we could, fool around with this, like 60 maybe, something like that, or to make it, to give it back that same look that we had before, or more closely approach that width, or excuse me, that look. So there's that. The other thing that we can do is we can go ahead and at this point change the color if we want to. Whoops. Go to the tree. We can select our path. And again, click on the fill with current color and then change our text color. So now it matches our section below. And then we can play the same trick. We can duplicate this and do a transform and rotate it in the X and Y direction to put the same sort of border on the bottom. So let's do that really quick. Make sure that we're selected out the main div. Go ahead and delete that. Select on this one. Go ahead and duplicate it. Don't worry if this error comes up. Just go ahead and drag your div to the place you want it to be and then click on the refresh. And then add our transform. So we're in transforms, add transform, rotate. This case we might not even want to do the Y transform, but we can anyway. See what it would look like. So we can kind of fool around with that a little bit to get it how we want it. And again, we can change the background color to blend into our next section. So that's how you can use different sites like GetWaves.io. There's a number of them out there that can design these sorts of different dividers. Okay. Let's look at one last use case for SVGs as dividers. In addition to simple geometric shapes, there are also a wealth of more complex SVG images available on the web that can easily be adapted to use as dividers. For example, svgsilh.com, which I think stands for SVG Silhouettes, has a wide variety of different SVG images that can easily be adapted to use as dividers. Let's bring that site into Pinegrow. So in order to do that, click on the plus tab in our library panel, click on the open, and put in the location. You can see the page loads in. Make sure our click icon is highlighted, and let's go ahead and do a search. Search for grass. Brings back a lot of images. And this one's pretty nice. So let's see if we can download it. Let's create a new folder in our project to hold our images. Okay, so now we have that file in our project. So if we look back here, if we go ahead and reload our project, we now see the images folder and we see that we have that image. So in this case, unlike the GetWaves site, which allowed us to directly download the SVG code, here we get an SVG image. If we were to just drag this to the page, it would load onto the page as an image, and we don't want that. We want to use it directly as the SVG so that we can take advantage of recoloring, resizing, and various things. So go ahead and double click. That's going to open it down here in our code editor. Now at this point, you want to take everything that's between the opening and closing SVG tags. So click here, scroll to the bottom, and then for me, I'm going to shift click and then command copy because I'm on a Mac. If you're on Linux or Windows, use whatever key combinations you would normally use. So now we have that SVG code just like we had from the GetWaves site. So we go back to our library and go to our insert code box and then paste that. So now we can drag this SVG to the page just like we were doing before. So I'm going to close this out. Let's get rid of this SVG. And let's bring our new SVG in. So I think I dragged it to the wrong place, so I'm just going to move it up. I think it's got to be one more out. So now we have this huge SVG up here that we're going to want to make a little smaller. So again, we're going to go into the element properties with the SVG selected, and we're going to go ahead and change the width. In this case, I think we're going to do it a little differently. So now this is getting us to where we have our entire SVG within the page, but I think it's a little bit big. It doesn't really work exactly as a divider. I guess it could. I guess you could, color this green, color your next section green, and have that work as a divider. But let's do this a little bit differently. So let's go back to our tree, and we're going to put this SVG into a container and row. So actually, I don't think we need this anymore. Can I delete that? Yes. So let's put this into a container and a row. So we're just going to grab a container. All right, so we want that container to be full width. So first, let's jump into the properties for size. Let's say fluid. So now we're spanning, I guess, the whole page. So now we should be the full page width. Next, basically we want this SVG, so we should move this inside the row. We want this SVG now to only take up part of the page, and I think maybe 4 of them across would be pretty good. So we're going to take this row. We could convert it into columns, but instead I think we'll just say row, and then for row columns we'll pick 4. So now we're getting there. So this is going to basically allow us to put 4 across of these. Go back to our tree. So right now we have a lot of height above and below just because of how things are being preserved as far as the SVG sizing. So we need to change that. So let's go back to SVG, go here. So right now we're at X mid, Y mid, meet. So what we can do is change that to none. That's going to give us a weird stretchy thing going on. So then we have to decide about how tall and how wide we want it. So now we're not doing the whole screen. Instead, we're doing the whole element. So we're going to say 100%. So that's going to give us the full width. And then we got to kind of pick a height. So let's try about 25%. So that looks pretty good. And so now what we can do is go back to our tree. With that SVG selected, we just hit 3 for the repeater and then go ahead and hit duplicate. So now we have this SVG stretching across the whole screen as a border. So we could now like change this to having, instead of a danger background, have a green background. It's a really sharp green, but that's okay. And then we have to color our SVGs. So here's where it can get tricky. We might be able to do this just with the text color like we did before. So in order to do this, we want to say fill with current color and then select the green for the text. That's going to turn our background green. So that didn't work. So instead, we're going to have to check what the SVG structure is. So it's got a path out here of G. Let's try changing this one. Fill with current color. Okay, there we go. So we had to give that inside thing a fill of current color in order to get it to work. So now we can do the next one. Okay, so now we have a butterfly-filled little divider there that separates out the top section from our next section. You can easily see how this would be useful if you had something like a Parklands website. You could instead select something like snowflakes or reindeers or ornaments if you were doing some kind of winter-themed page. So this is I think a pretty good way to make a divider, and then that divider is going to nicely size up and down with the rest of your page since it's SVG. And then down here, of course, we'd get rid of this and put some other sort of border in down here, or maybe even just a solid. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you now feel comfortable working with different types of dividers available in Pinegrow and out on the web. As always, the visual nature of Pinegrow invites you to experiment with different settings and see how they'll impact your page. This also allows you to then go ahead and inspect the CSS or inspect the raw HTML output to help improve your coding skills. So hopefully this helps somebody out. And hopefully you can now go forward and use the dividers that are built in as well as other dividers to make your pages really pop. So until next time, have fun designing with Pinegrow.